started, and then when people log on, they can join. So welcome. We're so happy you guys are here. There's already so many people from so many different places. My name is Laura McAulay, and I am the Assistant Director of Programming for the South Carolina Multilingual Learner Educator Network. And we're so happy you're here for Reimagining ML Teachers as Coaches. This is something that I'm extremely passionate about, and I'm happy that you guys are interested in it as well. And I hope that you bring a lot from this you take a lot from this presentation as well. So a little bit of housekeeping, please keep your microphones off. Consider also keeping your camera off. You don't have to, you can certainly keep it on, but don't feel pressure to keep your camera on. It does help with the internet if you keep it off. If you have any questions, feel free to place them in the chat. Depending on what's going on, we can talk about it during the presentation or afterwards, and it doesn't really matter. Here at the SCMLE network, we do like to reward you for your time. So we do provide a professional development certificate. And certificates will be emailed to you by a member of the programming committee. So it'll be Megan Gray, Haney Sabatino, or Melinda Jones on or before May 2nd. If you didn't receive it, check your spam. It most likely went there because we're some random person emailing you. So check your spam. And if you still don't see it by then, email me at laura@scmle.org and we'll be happy to forward it and send it your way. There is a feedback form. I'm going to ask Megan to go ahead and put it in the chat right now. Save that form for now, but we'll put it back in the chat box later as well as email it to you guys afterwards as well. We are a nonprofit, so we base everything we do off of what our community needs. So we do actually really value the feedback that you guys give us. So Megan, Katie Crook, sorry, would you like to, are you able to, sorry, I was talking to Megan and then Katie. Katie, Katie's waiting on a plumber. So
yes, I am.
Okay,
I
good.
have
Go
two
ahead.
kids here and I have a plumber on his way. So if I have to get it, that's fine. But I'm Katie Crook. I'm the director of the South Carolina Multilingual Learner Educator Network. We're really excited that you're here. Very thankful to Laura for putting this presentation together. She's absolutely fabulous at speaking on this topic, and we're really looking forward to kind of continuing to push this initiative forward. The goal of the South Carolina Multilingual Educator Network is to connect all educators, so not just teachers, but other stakeholders as well, counselors, administrators, district people, other staff, with opportunities for instructional support, networking, advocacy opportunities. We are a growing network. We've been together since 2019. We just reached nonprofit status in 2023. So we're definitely growing, and there's a lot of exciting things on the horizon. So we're really happy that you're joining us today. Really would like to welcome you to follow us on our various social media platforms, and especially to sign up for our mailing list and get one-ish emails a month with just kind of the latest updates on what we're doing. We are a nonprofit, and we have been operating with no budget for the last almost 5 years. And we just have some big dreams that we would like to kind of accomplish going forward. And we need your support and the support of other educators who are interested in helping us kind of meet our goals and coordinate the programs that we have in mind for supporting our teachers. So one of the ways you can do that is to purchase a t-shirt from our new t-shirt campaign. We as ML teachers are sometimes left out of the cute t-shirts that go on in the building. You know, sometimes like the teams will have shirts and we never have a team to have a shirt with. So we made our own shirts for ML teachers. And we hope that you're able to find one that you like. All the proceeds go to our mission, supporting our mission of supporting teachers across South Carolina and beyond. My doorbell just rang. Laura, can you continue?
I got you. You're all good. So the other thing is that Carolina TESOL is our TESOL organization between North and South Carolina. And in conjunction with them, we've created an April 2024 advocacy bingo, which no matter where you're from, you're more than welcome to participate in. Megan just put a clickable version in the chat, so feel free if you want to download it. We still have one more week left in May, and you're more than welcome to participate. And yeah, so we just wanted to give a shout out for that. So now let's get into the presentation. So who am I? Like I said, I'm Laura McAulay. I served as a K-12 ML teacher. For those of you that are not familiar with South Carolina at all, I taught for 3 years in Chesterfield County. Chesterfield County is along the top northern border. And if you're from this area, you know you generally drive through it on the way to the beach. And it's a very rural, but very large district in terms of geographical size. And I taught K-5 ML in Fort Mill, South Carolina, which is right outside of Charlotte, North Carolina. And I was an ML teacher for a combined 8 years between both of those districts. I worked at 6 different schools altogether. I was itinerant for 4 of those years, so I'm not a stranger to being a new person on the block. I feel like I was always trying to introduce myself to everyone. I taught second grade for a year before I moved into ML, and the reason I came into this field is because um my I had a newcomer that year who was from Mexico, who was also a SLIFE student, a student with limited or interrupted formal education. And she really struggled, and because of our large districts but limited resources, because we were so rural, I was really advocating for her. And as a first year, I understood as a first year teacher, like there's only so much I can do. This is very stressful. So I really can empathize with the classroom teacher because I very much felt that way myself. And the Title III coordinator from Chesterfield sent me to Carolina TESOL, and I was hooked. It was the perfect way for me to combine my Spanish minor as well as my education degree into each other. I went to Georgia Southern University, which is outside of Savannah, Georgia, and then I got my educational leadership degree from Clemson a couple years ago, and obviously have my ESOL certification. I'm originally from outside of Atlanta, though. I'm a triplet and a twin. My twin sister is a physical therapist, and my triplet brother or twin brother, you can say it that way too, but Graham has special needs. And so, really, my whole life was focused on advocacy for him and looking out for those that generally or do not receive equitable access to different things, whether it's education in the world. And so, there were a lot of things that I dealt with as a child, as a sibling of someone who has special needs that others don't necessarily have to deal with. And so advocacy has always been on my brain, even from when I was a child. And I currently live in Charlotte, North Carolina with my husband, Sam. We have almost a year and a half old son, Colin, and we have a dachshund, Wilson. So if you hear anything bark at some point, it's our little dachshund. He's super feisty, but he's a sweet boy. So today's objective is to empower, and yes, we are recording today, and yep, thank you, Megan, appreciate it. Our objective today is to empower and inspire ML teachers in their current role, just to maximize the potential of their school and all the things that are listed right there. The goal, we're only one person, or there's only a certain number of us in our building. And so it's really important that we share our knowledge. So that's what we're hopefully going to do today. Our talking points, we're going to be talking about setting boundaries, and you guys are like, ah, we're going to talk about setting boundaries. Why is it necessary to coach? And then we're actually going to talk about a few different things to give you tips to take with you. We're going to talk about how you can build relationships within your building. We're going to talk about working with teachers, right? That's what most of us are here for. Also with administrators as well, because that's a big part of what we do, and we just don't always think about it. And the other one no one ever talks about, but we also have to coach and work with general school personnel. That could be your registrar clerk in South Carolina. We use Power School. That could be a TA, a teacher assistant in the classroom. It could be your bookkeeper. It could be the secretary. There's so many people that we work with every single day. The school nurse, anything like that. So we're going to be talking about that a little bit as well. So this presentation may challenge your thinking, may make you feel a little uncomfortable. It may make your type A or control freak personality freak out a little bit. As teachers, we like to have control over the things that we do. And this is kind of releasing it a little bit. And that can be a little scary. But in doing so, it relieves stress, it helps your building become more inclusive, and it improves ownership over our MLs in our building. And that, at the end of the day, is what we're trying to achieve, is a world where all teachers and staff have ownership over every single child that's in the building, and we collaborate together. So in the chat box, what are some struggles that you see outside of your instruction to your students? So forget teaching for a minute. What are some struggles that you see, and stay positive? We're not here to really complain, but what are some things that you see? I'll give you guys a minute to put that in the chat box. And I have a dual monitor here, so if you see me look to the left, I'm not looking away. Like a teacher collaboration for sure. Time, always. It's always time. Mhm. Common planning for sure. Yeah, absolutely. Feel free to put some in. We're going to talk about obstacles on the next slide. Yeah, not know how to engage with him. Equity, mental health services. Yes, yes. Communication among staff. Absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. So some overall struggles, time, mental health. Feel free to still type in if you're still typing. Some overall struggles that we see that we can face outside of the physical instruction that we do is obviously teacher resistant and administration resistance. Understanding the students and program for sure. We're going to talk a lot today about kind of just supporting teachers and administrators, and we're gonna see how we need to be thinking about them in an asset-based mindset kind of way. It's not knocking them. I think one thing, if you take anything away from today, is understanding that teachers and administrators, they a lot of times what they do and how they act has a lot to do with their knowledge and what level of knowledge and background knowledge they have. We talk about background knowledge a lot in our field, and they sometimes have limited background knowledge, but also the fact that when you're working with a new student population, a new kind of student that you're not used to working with, it can make you feel very uncomfortable. So you have to figure out a way to get out of your comfort zone, and that can be very daunting. And so that's where a lot of the resistance comes from. Is it's not something that a lot of people are used to yet, or a lot of people are think is too much work or things like that. And so there's a lot of resistance from that. Obviously, we can face parent contact issues or feelings of loneliness in our mission. We can be the only person in the building that cares about equity, and that can be a very difficult position to put someone in. So those are some obstacles that we can face as we move through this presentation. What is our role in this building? And we're going to talk about this when we talk about setting boundaries here in a minute. But here's some things that kind of sum up what we do. I know there's probably more that we can add here, but we process, assess, and instruct ML students for language acquisition, obviously. We write and share accommodation plans. We provide support to classroom teachers and administrators. Some of us serve as interpreters or translators, even though that's not necessarily our main job description. It can be a part of our job, but it's not necessarily our main job. We can help facilitate also those interpretations as well. Assist students with a variety of tasks for school procedures, planning futures, home needs. That's really, a lot of people don't think about that, but we do a lot of that in our job. And we also obviously advocate and increase cultural competency and inclusion in our school building. That's a big part of what we do. And so that's kind of our role here. And so one thing we're going to talk about today, this is when things are going to start to get a little uncomfortable. So hang on tight. We're going to get through the uncomfortableness, and then we'll go into tips and stuff. So here's the thing, as an ML teacher, when you do everything for your staff, you actually prevent achieving educational equity and justice in your building. So let that sink in for a minute. You're actually preventing educational equity and justice, right? The reason that is the case is because it's exhausting for us. It also does our teachers a disservice, and we're also just one person in that building. And so true educational equity, true justice is when everyone's on the same mission field for that kind of equity. And when you always accommodate tests, when you always do everything for your staff, that holds your staff back in achieving that equity. And that can be really difficult because we feel like, well, our teachers just don't want to do it. Well, that's why this presentation is here today. So we have to keep in mind what's our actual role here, and where are the lines drawn? Where should we create those boundaries there? So there's a difference between empowering a teacher to provide best practices and accommodations and us taking responsibility for that class's compliance with that. Right? There's a difference there. There's also a difference between you empowering is a key word here, school staff to communicate with parents, even if using an interpreter, right? Even if you are the interpreter and you specifically by yourself doing all the phone calls or contact with an ML family. There's a difference between those two, and it's a little bit nuanced, right? So when we talk about setting boundaries, we aren't solely responsible for the classroom teacher implementing accommodations, right? We have an investment in that student success and we want equity, but at the end of the day, we ultimately we can't ensure compliance for our building. Number one, we're just one person. Number one, we are considered a general education program, right? And therefore we are just a teacher in a lot of ways. So it's not our job to ensure compliance. That's where an administrator comes in, the district office comes in, things like that. So we can't think of ourselves as if I don't do accommodate this test, it's not going to happen. Well, that's a hard thing to grapple with, but at the end of the day, we have to figure out a way to get that. We have to help with that, but we can't be the ones doing it because we can't ensure compliance. We can't put that legality on our back. And we're also not solely responsible for all teacher and parent communication in the school building. We're not. And a lot of you are like, well, I have only Spanish speaking parents and I speak Spanish fluently, or I have my interpreting certificate, whatever. I have to. Okay. Do all English speaking families have to work through a third party to contact anyone in the building? If their child is sick and the nurse wants to call, do they have to work through the ML teacher to talk about their child being sick? If they got in trouble and the administrator wants to call and therefore says, "Hey, Laura, you go call them," is that really your job? Now, is that truly equitable? Who would you want to hear from? You would want to hear directly from the source. Because the other thing too is we also are not that person, whether it's the nurse, the classroom teacher, the administrator, we're not them. So there's a lot of language there that can get lost because we're not the ones and if we're trying to act as an administrator, we're not an administrator. So having a phone conversation for an administrator is probably not going to work out very well for you, right? And it and so it doesn't just because it's easier for us to do it. Now, whether that's the administrator giving it to you, the classroom teacher, you think it's just easier if I do it. That doesn't mean it's actually in the best interest of MLs and their families, right? It doesn't actually mean that. So we have to consider, so that's what we're going to be talking about here with coaching and sitting alongside them and talking with them is these are some hard things because I feel like a lot of us are adding things onto our plate that don't really need to, that we don't need to. So, but at the same time, we're not setting boundaries without willing to help scaffold that independence. We're not saying, good luck, have fun, you got this. Don't call me if you need me, right? We're not saying that. Setting boundaries does not mean we're not willing to help. It doesn't mean that we're not a member of the team, right? And the end, we should still be involved in parent teacher conferences, IEP meetings, instructional concerns. We should be heavily involved with that. But we shouldn't be the only ones that care and the only ones that communicate with parents and the only ones that deal with that stuff, right? So, setting boundaries actually increases teacher independence while maintaining your voice because you're helping them do it, right? And having boundaries does not mean you're disengaged or unaware of what's going on. It doesn't mean that a child's working through the MTSS or RTI process and you're like, well, that's not my job. Good luck with that. It doesn't mean you can disengage from that. It's just setting boundaries does not mean that. At the end of the day, if you set boundaries and then you coach them, right, it helps everyone build ownership over MLs and their families. So, you just like I said, you don't desert the staff member in their time of need, right? That's when you have to step into the coaching role, right? So now we've said all the things that make people feel a little uncomfortable. So now we're going to talk about the coaching part, right? We had to talk about that first because if you're going to coach, if you're going to make a difference, if you are going to relieve some pressure off of your back, you have to understand what boundaries you have to set in place to do that. What kind of systemic inequalities are you supporting that have led to the how your job is in the first place, right? So why is it necessary to become an ML coach, right? Why is it necessary to coach at all, right? Number one, it shares our wealth of knowledge. We sometimes are the only person in the building that has any idea of equitable instruction practices for language acquisition for our MLs, right? It's not fair to the staff. It's not fair to the child for us to keep that to ourselves, right? That's not best practices there. They also have a greater chance at success academically and in life if we do so. One thing we'll talk about a lot today is we are only one person in the building. They spend most of their day with other people, not us. So if we keep that knowledge to ourselves and we're not coaching the staff around us, we're actually preventing our students from having the amount of success that they can have, right? Helps build stronger family engagement and empowers families because all of a sudden you coaching the teachers and the administrators and the school personnel and having those conversations, bringing the families in, making those connections with the rest of your school staff actually empowers that family to talk to those people themselves. Understands, listen, I know if Laura's busy, and not saying I can't interpret, but if I know Laura's busy, but I can still call the nurse and we can figure this out together. Right? That's empowering. That's giving education back to the families where it should be. It removes some systemic additions to our plates. There's quite a few things that we do in our job that technically aren't our job, right? I bet you guys are nodding your head at that. But we have to do it because it's the way it's always done, not necessarily, right? It also promotes collaboration rather than isolation. I feel like a lot of us as ML teachers, we kind of just isolate ourselves, or whether we're itinerant, especially if we're itinerant, right? We just kind of isolate ourselves, or we're hesitant to put ourselves out there or engage with others. We're so busy working with students, right? So coaching promotes that collaboration, right? Which also increases ML academic and life and success in life, right? It also obviously increases educational equity in your building. So the other thing is we can do a lot by ourselves, but we shouldn't have to. We should not have to, right? We cannot go in, it does a disservice to students, like I said, when you have the mindset of my job is to only work with ML students. Is just a teacher with MLs. I'm just going to work with the kids in my classroom. That's the only thing I have to do. You have to understand the big picture. And this is a phrase that I use often, and I don't claim it as my own, but I use it all the time. All students are language learners and all teachers are language teachers, right? All students are language learners and all teachers are language teachers, right? But if we actually believe that, we have to show grace to our staff and assist them in achieving that goal and achieving that success with those students, right? Like I said, students spend most of the day with everyone else in their building. And when we coach, we actually activate all parties' funds of knowledge, and that in itself promotes collaboration, right? And one thing we also like forget too is that our teachers know more than they think they do. They come in very scared, very hesitant, things like that, but a lot of their gut feeling on how to work with these students is correct, right? Is correct. And it's all about building that confidence in those teachers and seeing it's not adding to your plate, it's promoting success for your entire classroom, right? So, what are some struggles to becoming a coach, right? Well, number one, we don't have any power. We're just a teacher. There's a lot outside of our sphere of influence. There's a lot outside of our actual control. We're just a teacher, right? And so that's why we're reimagining ourselves as a coach, is because we don't have any authority whatsoever. But people think we do, but we don't, right? And also, it can feel like added work. Me saying that you should be coaching, it adds something else to your plate. It feels like I'm adding to your job description or adding things that you're doing. But once again, we have to think long game here. And once you kind of coach them, you'll end up taking things off your plate, right? And so it just takes a little bit more time at the beginning, but then it kind of just gets infused with your day-to-day life. And also lack of training, which is why you guys are here. How would I even go about this? So hot take, and this is this is one of my favorite things. Sometimes I put things in presentations just to get your attention, but my goal as an ML teacher is to become not needed, right? That means administrators, teachers, families, students don't only need me because all staff are empowered with the tools to succeed with ML families and ML students themselves, right? So, yes, absolutely, Melinda, for sure. It does help. And that's the thing. I'm not saying we actually need to put ourselves out of a job here because we are federally required. Okay. I just put that little note there on the bottom just because. But my dad says this, and I'm not equating our job to this at all. But my dad does have cancer. He's fine, but he does have a little bit. So he goes to see an oncologist. And we've had family that's passed away from cancer. And one thing that my dad always says when it comes to an oncologist, whenever he meets whenever he meets someone who studies cancer, anything like that, he always says, "I hope one day you're out of a job." Right? And I'm not saying that we're anything like an oncologist. Very, very different. That's a very hard job to have. But it's the same kind of mindset, right? That we've impacted our building enough that I'm ultimately not needed to increase student success. However, here's the thing that that people don't understand is that when you take on this mindset of I'm going to coach people so that they don't always need me, you actually become indispensable to them. And the reason you become indispensable to your school building is that through coaching, you've ingrained yourself in that school culture. So they come to you to collaborate. There's always going to be a new student from somewhere. There's always going to be a new situation, something different, or a new state standard you're doing, or anything like that. There's always going to be new challenges that we deal with in our field, right? And when we become get in that culture of I can do this myself, and I can do this, I can do this, right? When we teach our teachers and administrators and our school staff to have that confidence, they're going to come to us to collaborate. They're going to come to us to share. They're going to know that we're there to work with them, and that is a beautiful thing. And I think that's one thing that we hope we get from this. So that's great, but how would I even go about doing this? So we're going to get into all the tips, all the nitty gritty, but I want you all to know there's probably some things that I'm going to talk about today that you already do. Okay. And that you need to pat yourself on the back for that. You need to take that and say, and have that mindset of, oh, I do that. And then channel it and use it for your good and expand on that. So if you do some of these things, I hope it empowers you to be more intentional about doing the things that you already do. So, because everyone, I know all of you here really care about your jobs and really care about the students that you work with. So hopefully, if you do some of these things that I'll say today, I hope that just empowers you. So your mind shift change. So the first thing we got to do before we can build relationships, before we can coach teachers, administrators, school personnel, is we have to have a mind shift change. So you have to decide as a teacher what's your vision. It is very helpful to work in a school building where where the vision of the school building matches your vision. The last school I worked at was like that, and it was super empowering, because I knew that my principal was 100% on board, right? But that's not the case everywhere. And you have to decide what's your vision. What are you hoping to achieve, right, within your building? What do you wish you could change about your building? What can you imagine it, right? What can you imagine it can do? Right? So, and understand that you are a agent. You know a lot of information and you can have a really wide impact. We work with almost every single person in the school building. Not many people in our building can say that. So that the amount of impact we have can be a ton, right? We work with all different kinds of students. They're in all different kinds of grade levels, all different kinds of classes, right? So we have an ability to truly impact the whole school building and we just don't realize it because we think, oh, I'm just teaching language when it's so much more than that, right? So I encourage you to challenge the status quo, right? Be willing to lead or put yourself out there, right? Even when success is not guaranteed, right? Consider systemic improvements, such as interpretations. You know, what are some things you can do with that? You can be in the room while that teacher uses that interpreting service, or while you're interpreting for them, right? But maybe that's a systemic change that you can make, right? Or who's giving out information, or who's meeting with parents, right? Those kinds of things can really be easy improvements to make. And one thing from Marzano, that's a classic leadership book, from School Leadership That Works. It's consistently attempting to operate at the edge versus the center of a school's competence. So you always want to be pushing it, but we want to keep in mind it's small steps, small steps. You can't change the world in a day, right? And we're going to talk about all that here in a minute, right? We just got to set the groundwork for it. You have to be okay with being uncomfortable. You have to be okay with telling someone no, but I'll come help you. I'll walk you through it. I'm happy to walk you through it, right? And so we are afraid, myself included, are afraid of saying no. And you have to be comfortable with what are some solutions to help someone through that. So before you can do anything, you have to build relationships. Relationships. It's the most powerful thing you can do. As an ML teacher, it circumvents issues of your sphere of influence, right? Gets around all that. It promotes openness and a willingness to listen. And it creates a culture of collaboration and in the trenches. A lot of times, classroom teachers can feel like we have an easy job because we don't have to do everything that they have to do. We don't have to go to all the extra stuff that they often have to do. And so a lot of times they think that we have the easiest job. I mean, how many of you guys have had someone come up to you and say, "Hey, I'm interested in being an ML teacher. It seems easier. I just want to get out of the classroom." And you're like, it's not easier, but thank you so much for misinterpreting what I do every day. It's a wonderful thing, but it being easy is not a reason you should be an ML teacher because it is not easy, right? And so that kind of building relationships just builds that culture and helps people understand what exactly it is that we do. So many people think, well, they just teach the colors and numbers and stuff. Like, they're so they have their mind doesn't quite grasp everything that we do and the expertise that we have. So it's important that we promote that culture of collaboration in there. And you can't stay in your own room or office or your little closet that they've given you and with the same room as a coffee room. I've literally worked out of a coffee room before, right? You can't you can't stay in there and expect change to happen around you. You can't say, well, these people don't care about me, so I'm not going to leave the building. I don't care about them. You cannot have that mindset. You have to put yourself out there, even if someone is not going to accept you, right? And that can be very difficult, even myself included, right? So we have to be genuine and we have to get to know our staff, right? Even through simple day-to-day interactions. We look towards the future and predict the needs and we fill them. Even it's for administrators or office staff. An example of that is one year my bookkeeper needed to pass out forms for a summer school. And she was just standing there saying, I really don't have time. I'm trying to get this stuff closed out. And she was just asking anyone, there's a few people around, does anyone mind taking it? And I happen to be in the office, as many of us ML teachers are. Feel like we're always in the office talking to the registrar, right? And I said, I'll take them, no problem. It's 5 forms, no worries. And I just took it, right? Doing things like that, getting someone, if someone says, oh my gosh, I just ran out of paper towels and the custodian's not coming. Oh, I'll go find them. I'll talk to somebody and get them for you. Those little acts of kindness go a long way. Um, and it really shows them that you're there for them specifically. And people don't really realize that, but when you're new to a building or when you're trying to build a relationship, doing those little things, even though we just talked about setting boundaries, but being genuine and kind and filling needs like that really opens up that kind of it opens up the world for them to see that you are there for the whole school, not just for your ML students, right? Offer to provide and resources. Once again, setting boundaries does not mean you desert them, right? So if there's a teacher with a newcomer or families who don't speak English, offer to be there for them. Offer to say, hey, let's figure this out together. Don't worry, we got this. We can do this, right? We can do this. And follow through with that. Be present and check in with them. Hey, how are you doing? How's everything going with so and so? Are you doing okay? Especially with our new teachers that are very uncomfortable, they need that self confidence. And a lot of times we're the only ones that can give them that feedback. And they'll come to you and say, well, this is kind of what I did, but I wasn't sure if it was right. Yeah, that's awesome. And be specific with your feedback. I love that you gave them a graphic organizer for that. I love that you put that visual on there. That really is helpful, truly, right? And like I said, be willing to take something off their plate if they're feeling overwhelmed or something new came up. There's been times where because I co-taught as well, and there were times where something came up and I was like, I don't mind creating this Kahoot or this assessment for us or whatever. I don't mind doing that for us, right? Or I don't mind getting that from the printer for you. If they're feeling really overwhelmed, it just, especially with the newcomer, it's what can you do to help them and provide them with something that makes them feel a little bit less stressed out? A lot of times will go a long way. And think outside the box. You have to show that you're there for the whole school, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. But doing things for your bookkeeper, doing things for a random staff member that you hear something's going on, writing them a note, just being kind a lot of times shows them that you're there to integrate into the school culture. Because I know in South Carolina, a lot of us are hired actually by the school district. And I know in a lot of other places it varies whether or not they're hired by the school, but um, in South Carolina, it can feel like a rotating door at times of people coming in and out based on the numbers in the building. And so you have to show that you're there for the whole school and not just for MLs. So, and the other thing is to calm fears, right? We kind of just talked about that briefly, but I'm here to help. We'll do this together. You got this. A lot of the reasons we face resistance from people, whether it's a teacher, a school staff, a school personnel, is they feel not confident. I know in South Carolina, we've been working on our Power School, which is our registration service, a database. Changes every year in terms of it feels like, in terms of things that we do and what numbers we have to input and things like that and with access scores, and that's what we do here in South Carolina. And and they're so stressed. I'm like, it's okay. Let's walk you through it together. I'll help you. And my registrar really appreciated that. And we really built a deep relationship because it was no worries. We got it done together. Together is the key. And if you show them you're not, we'll talk about this later, but if you show them you're not just there as a business transaction, it goes a long way. Goes a long way. Instead of I need this, it's hey, can we work on this together? Changing it from I to we is really impactful in anything in life, right? Thank you, Caroline. Um, and show appreciation for the small things. It really goes a long way. One thing that I learned from my last assistant principal, Rachel, she said, so many times when I go into a classroom to do an observation, right? She said, I like to give positive feedback on something that they don't think that they're doing, that it's second nature to them, but it's something that is really good. And I thought that's such an impactful thing because what happens is when you comment on someone doing that, even if this teacher is a 10th grade US history teacher and they're just lecturing all day, right? Even if they're doing that, if they're putting visuals in their PowerPoint, then you can say, "Oh my gosh, I love how you put visuals in your PowerPoint. That's so helpful. I'm really happy you did that." Well, guess what they're going to do? They're going to put more visuals in their PowerPoints because you commented on that. Right? So use authentic positive reinforcement. Don't fake it. We're not here to try to be fake here. But once again, you're focused on building those relationships. So you want to be as genuine as possible. So and also say thank yous to administrators too. A lot of us forget about our poor little administrators and they're super stressed. And I know a lot of us face a lot of obstacles when it comes to administrators, myself included. I have dealt with that a lot over the years, worked with like 9 different principals. And so it can be very difficult. But they need to know if they're making a change, if they're doing something that impacted teachers, like, oh man, this is so good for the MLs, like, oh my gosh, and all the other kids too. Thank you so much for doing this initiative. It sounds really stupid, but it helps. And they need to feel appreciated too. A lot of times they don't get that same level of appreciation because they are the boss. But building that relationship with administrators is important as well. So, like I said, it should be about a connection and a collaboration, not a business transaction. And I talked about us to someone else, but the thing about coaching is it also works the other way. It also works the same way from a teacher to us or an administrator to us. We also shouldn't be a business transaction for them. Hey, I need you to accommodate this test. I need you to do this test with him. I need you to make a graphic organizer. I need you to call this parent, right? We hear that a lot as well. And when you coach and you create that connection and collaboration, it removes the business transaction on both sides. And because we know that there's so many things that we actually need our classroom teachers and administrators to do. Like, no, I actually really need you to look over this accommodation plan and sign it. It's a non-negotiable. You have to sign this, and we have to chase them down. There are some things that we have to do, but the rest of the time, we need it to be more about a collaboration so that when we go to them for things that actually really truly have to be done in those situations, it's not seeing like I'm adding to their plate, right? I built a relationship enough with them that they are more than happy to do that for us. So I created this kind of graphic here. Feel free to take a picture or whatever. It's just a way to scaffold increased colleague independence because we talk about this with students a lot, but sometimes we don't think we have to do the same thing with the people that we work with, and we do. Um, so this graphic would apply to things such as helping someone implement accommodations and best practices, using translation and interpretation tools for parent contact, or for them to collaborate with the bilingual interpreter to have those conversations themselves. And it can adapt to really any situation that you want. So the first thing is you may have to do it yourself, but here's the thing, y'all. So many of us do things, but we don't tell them what we did or how we did it. So that's what you have to do. You have to go back and you have to follow up and say, this is how I did it. Let me show you. Let me tell you what I did. This is what I did to make it easier for this ML student. This is how I accommodated this assessment. You see how I reduced the number of words in this matching thing, but I just split it up. I just did 5 and 5 instead of 10 matching questions. Do you see how I did that? That's kind of all I did here. That kind of thing, it goes in their brain. And once they see that it works, then they'll do it, right? The next step would be to go to them. Don't ask them to come to you because you know they're not. You know they're gonna be like, oh, I got sidetracked. Go to them and collaborate to complete the task. If they say, hey, I need this assessment accommodated, say, great. Do you mind if I come after school and we can do it together? And I'll help you with it. That way they're not doing it by themselves. They're not getting freaked out because they think it's some big thing, but you're coming to help them. The next step is go to them and sit while they complete the task or give them feedback afterwards. A lot of times they'll send you what, especially if you started to build relationships, they'll send it to you and say, hey, how does this look? Yeah, this is what I like, but be specific with what you like about it, right? Be specific about the feedback again that you're giving them. And just have those kinds of conversations. And then the last one, at some point, y'all, you're going to have to encourage them to do it independently, right? But say, hey, I'm more than happy to offer support if you need it. Hey, I'll check in with you after you do it, or hey, show it to me when you're done. I'm happy to look over it, or look at it if you need me to. Things like that, or just go check in on him afterwards and say, hey, how did it go? I know you were a little worried about it, but how did it go? I know with the school counselor, she was calling students about something and she had to use our third party interpretation service, and she was super nervous about it, and I was like, here are the instructions, I'm here with you every step of the way, but you let me know if you need anything, okay? And I went back to my room and I went back to her later and I said, hey, how did it go? And she was like, it was so easy, it was so much easier than I thought. I'm like, there you go, you did it. And the same thing with my principal too. My principal, my last principal, was very nervous about using that. And then once you kind of teach them how to do it, once you support them through that process, you don't just say, good luck. It's not my job. You got it. Once you support them through that learning process and they do it, then they're confident to do it themselves. And all of a sudden, Chad, and that's what my principal's name, Chad would come to me and say, hey, I called that parent, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, there you go. Awesome. And this is a side thing. Can you still accommodate assessment or call a parent? Yes. Do not leave this presentation saying, well, Laura said that I can't ever call a parent ever again. That's not what I'm saying, right? You can absolutely still do it. You just need to decide when's the appropriate time, right? So is it a situation where the student's been missing or been out of school for 10 days? Can you call a parent? Absolutely. you know, is there a situation where the teacher's been absent, or all of a sudden the district has put something on their plate that's insane and they're trying to accommodate assessment? And you can always tell when they're really overwhelmed. Say, don't worry, I got you. Let me do it for you this time, right? This time, the keyword this time, right? Because you want it to be something where you're there to help, but you're not there to take that on as your day to day life, right? So there's a difference between the two. So now working with teachers. So we're going to talk about working with teachers, administrators, and then general school personnel. So whole school PDs have their place. They're very important. They're a good way to get information out to a lot of people at one time, right? But you need to make sure that you're specific with what you're presenting, and it needs to be applicable, right? It needs to be something that they can take with them and use the next day. But don't give them 50,000 things to do. Focus on a couple of ideas. They are already stressed. Do not feel like they're already super stressed. There's already all these district initiatives that are telling them to do this, to do that. There's the principal saying, now you got to do PLC, so I want you to do this and that. There's always people telling them what to do. So you have to frame it in a way that is giving information, but giving them tangible things that they don't even have to think about, right? And make sure they walk away, like I said, walk away with something that they would like to try. But one thing that I would also suggest is that you make sure, and this goes with anybody, we know that best practices for MLs are best practices for everyone, but we have to help our teachers and administrators see that as well. So we need to show, if we're giving instructional strategies, for instance, we need to show how it can also be applied to the whole class. Give them something that's helpful for them. Give them something that they can use with a whole class, not just with one student. um, and a lot of people are like, well, what about newcomers? Yeah, that's a little bit different for sure. They're going to take any strategy that you give them with a newcomer and use it, right? But for the general day-to-day best practices and accommodations for students, those can be applied. You know, using sentence frames, sentence starters can be applied for everyone. And sometimes all it takes is you saying that in your PD. Hey, this is great for your whole class. How many of you have a student whose native language is English, but can't start a paragraph for their life? And a lot of them are going to raise their hand, right? So that sometimes you just got to say it. And they've just never thought about it, and the light bulb goes off, and they're like, "Oh yeah, that's true." And you're like, "Yeah, graphic organizers are very helpful for everyone." And so sometimes, for students that have a hard time learning vocabulary, maybe doing this strategy would help everyone in your whole class. And like, "Oh, you're so right." And you're like, "Yeah, you just got to do that." But also back up what you're saying. Be willing to help with implementation to reduce the anxiety. You need to be open with it. Say, I'm more than happy to come by, but also check on teachers that really need that help and go in and check on them afterwards and say, "Hey, listen, that strategy, would you like me to help you implement it in your class?" So it's just that kind of collaboration. Don't just give them a PD and say, "Good luck, see ya," right? You have to follow through with what you're doing, right? Day-to-day interactions are powerful. I think a lot of us forget about those, but that's actually probably where most of our coaching is going to happen, right? And there's some sneaky ways. I like to do things in sneaky ways, right? Right? There are sneaky ways to coach people that make them not even realize they're being coached, right? The first one, you send work back or you share the work that you're doing in your classroom with those teachers. There are so many times I'll walk back and say, "Hey, this is what we're working on today." And they're like, "Oh, wow, this is amazing." And it starts a conversation. And like, "Hey, this is what this student was able to do in my class today. Giving this support, they were able to do this." And all of a sudden, like, I wonder if I could do that. The answer is yes, you could, right? And all it was an interaction, right? All grade levels, whether it's kindergarten or 12th grade, right? Be open with what your current objectives are with that student. We a lot of times keep that information to ourselves. We don't share what we're working on currently. We're just not open with what we're working on. And there are a lot of times when just being open with it, then that opens the door for collaboration. There are so many things that, for instance, working with first grade students on phonics, I went and talked to their teacher, say, "Hey, this is kind of what I was working on with them today. And what kinds of things are you doing with them?" And all of a sudden, she and I would talk about phonics all the time with them. Right. So then we're having a conversation. It's creating that collaboration between teachers. And the other thing that that does, and also with the last one, before I get to that point, if you push on or co-teach, the classroom teacher is always watching. And you need to understand that when you walk in the building that or walk in that classroom, that's a very powerful experience because what you're doing in that room is an opportunity for you to impact what that classroom teacher does in the future, right? What it really is. They want to see what you're doing and they're nosy and they want to make sure you're teaching their students right. So they'll come over and they look and see what you're doing and say, "Hey, this is what I was able to do with him today," or "This is what I worked on today." And a lot of times what this also does, this is the point that I was going to talk about before, was it also shows that you are qualified as a teacher. There are so many times when they don't think we know what we're doing, or they forget that many of us come from a general ed background, or that many of us have an education degree sometimes. And there's just situations that arise, and we have to show them that, hey, we actually do bring a lot to the table. We actually have a lot of knowledge here that isn't just teaching numbers and colors and whatever. There's a lot that we actually know. And a lot of people also forget that we don't just teach social language, we also teach academic language. They forget about that part because they just don't see it. And so if you're sharing that information with them, all of a sudden they see, oh, these are some academic related things that they're working on. Like, yeah, that's a huge part of our job. Our job is to make sure they're successful in the classroom and beyond, right? That's why we teach social language, but we have to teach academic language as well. But they don't know that if they don't see it, right? So the other way that's really easy to do is openly celebrate success. Be super enthusiastic about it. If there's a student that you're both struggling with, share it. Include the strategies that you did, and it helps them and gives them ideas. When I co-taught kind of in fifth grade, we had a newcomer from Finland who was only here for 1 year. His father was working in Charlotte, and the teacher was very nervous about working with that particular student, just like not sure what to do. And I would include strategies that I would use with him in order to write. And then she took that and did it herself. And she would show it to me afterwards because I celebrated what that student was able to do in my classroom. So, once again, those day to day interactions, openly celebrating success goes a long way. And it's an opportunity for you to sneak in some instructional strategies that you did because it implants a seed in their brain. And then you can also say, "I'm happy to help you ever figure out if you want to do this in your classroom." So being seen makes a difference. And that's the last thing I want to say about this particular thing. that regular interaction with your colleagues, um, in a way that's collaborative, not just I need this from you. It shows them that you're there for them. It shows them that you're there for their students, that you're there to help them with whatever assessment they take at the end of the year, whatever, help them have success with that. It shows them that you're there, especially if you're itinerant, especially if you're new. You have to get out of the classroom, have those conversations, because then you become a part of the building and you become a partner with that teacher. And that's what we really need for change. So the other thing, and this is going to freak some people out, but that's okay. You can also fight to attend PLCs, grade level or content area plannings, et cetera, as you can and as is applicable. Now, you can't go to everything. That's impossible. We have stuff that we have to do, right? We have things we have to work with students on. We can't spend every day in meetings, right? We can't do that. So you have to build relationships first, even get in the door for these things. That's the biggest thing. There can and there will be pushback to you asking to go to grade level or content area planning. There will be pushback for you attending a PLC meeting. But I want you to keep in mind, if there is a math interventionist in there, or a literacy interventionist or a literacy coach, math coach, whatever you have in your building, if there's someone like that in the room when those meetings are happening, why can't you? Why can't you? Because you have that language expertise, right? And it seems like would be adding to your plate, but it actually allows you to be proactive instead of reactive when it comes to the instruction that a grade level or a content area is doing. And it allows you to have a little bit more voice in what's going on. However, and you need to understand that you need to kind of stay in your lane a little bit. You need to know your role. There's going to be pushback on it, a lot of things, because they a lot of classroom teachers or even administrators will see it as if you're going to be judging them, right? Or you're in there as a gotcha, right? And that's why you have to build relationships first, because they need to see that you're not there as a gotcha. So a good way to approach it, if you're co-teaching, that's an easy way in. If you're pushing in, you can say, "Hey, listen, I really would like to come to this so that way I'm better prepared when I push into your classroom." That's all you have to say. And then they're like, "Oh yeah, no worries." And but go in there and don't say anything, right? At first, you just need to this, like I said, know your role, stay in your lane. You're not coming at it with a content lens, you're coming at it with a language lens. So you're not impacting what they're actually going to be teaching, you're impacting how they're going to be teaching it or the assessments, right? So a lot of things are you want to offer to curate or find a resource is probably the easiest way. So when I co-taught fourth grade social studies and science, I would go to their grade level plannings for social studies and science, and I would sit in it. I tried to go at least every week if I could, but I would especially try to go before a unit started, because all teachers, a lot of research talks about backwards design and UDL, right? And so a lot of times we complain about the assessments are terrible, right? We complain about what's happening, but you can't change an assessment right before it happens a lot of times, but you can impact it ahead of time, right? So if you're in there so I would be in there just listening to them, chilling. A lot of times didn't necessarily say too much, but sometimes when they were looking at an assessment, I would say, "Hey, that question seems a little confusing. Is there a way that we can reword that?" Or I would say, we're gonna make sure, hey, and this includes myself. I was like, and I would make sure I said that too. I was like, hey, this is just a reminder for me as well. But when we're gonna say construct an argument here, we need to make sure we show them what that means. We teach the students what it means, what the expectations are when we say construct an argument, right? And you can apply that to any academic language, tier two language that you want. But you saying those things, all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, you're right. And it kind of, once again, plants that seed of I need to be more specific with my instruction. And maybe I need to reword this question in a different way. And the other thing too is curating resources. There are a lot of times that it's really easy to say, oh, and everybody's handing out assignments, especially if the grade level's working together on something or the content area. It's like, I don't mind putting that Kahoot together, whatever. Or that kind of PowerPoint or that activity, I can do that, or that quiz, I can do that. And so I would come in and be seen as a team member rather than someone that was coming to get them. And there are people that come to me years afterwards, like 2 or 3 years afterwards, say, "Hey, we did your quiz today," because they could see it that I was the one that made it. And they're like, "Oh, that was awesome. Thank you so much." And you see how much that impact goes on more than, because I didn't teach fourth, I was in second grade co-teaching at that point. So I'd already left fourth grade, and the fourth grade teacher still came to me and said, "Hey, I love that thing that you did. Thank you so much." I'm like, "You're welcome." Even though I did it like 3 or 4 years ago. That's the kind of long lasting impact you can have on a grade level or a content area for sure. Um, and if you're trying to get in, just phrase it like, I want to support the kids. I want to make sure EOCs are successful. I want to make sure, what can I do to help with kids as they're working towards the end of course test, as they're working towards whatever formative assessment, whether it's MAP, STAR, whatever you guys give, or the standardized testing for that state, whatever. Phrase it like that. I just want to do it to help the kids and see what I can do to help. If you phrase it like that, you're coming at it from a very humble perspective, and then you're more likely willing to get in. If you're thinking, I can't go to all of them, that's okay. Choose, if I were you, I would choose, if you're co-teaching, the obvious answer is you go into the PLC that you're co-teaching with, obviously, right? But if you're not, what are some things you can do? Well, you pick the one that has the most MLs, or the MLs that are generally have the lowest English language proficiency, right? You can do that. You can also do the grade level that the MLs especially are performing the lowest on that in a course test or that standardized assessment. Maybe they, in South Carolina, third grade is a really good one to go into, because of the read to succeed laws. For those of you that don't know, it just, if you don't pass the standardized test and you don't go to summer school, you get held back. So that would be a great way to do it. So you just got to think, what's going to be the biggest bang for your buck? What's going to make the biggest difference? Yes, Jamie, the recording will be shared. So that's kind of what I would do. And just keep in mind, you have to be proactive, not reactive. So that's why getting in on these things will be helpful. But if your school's not ready, won't do this or you're not ready, you can do, there's things listed. I'm sure you've had time to read it as I've chit chatted, but talk with the teacher, having those conversations prior to a unit, sitting down and planning with them. Obviously, if you're co-teaching or pushing in, you want to make sure you're talking about the next unit way in advance, right? Focus on how you help them, the teacher, or take something off their plate, right? How are you going to contribute to that? Get added to the shared drives. People forget about these. If you guys have a shared drive system, you can get added to that. And that allows you to see the content, it allows you to see the assessment, it allows you to see that stuff. And you can say, hey, listen, this is your assessment for this, right? And they're like, yeah, that's the one we're using. I think this is going to be a little bit difficult. What can we do to collaborate on making it more accommodated for our students? Right. But once again, you have to have those conversations ahead of time, and being able to look at that stuff helps you. The other thing is grade level or content area. A lot of principals require teachers to sequence out their year. Obviously, dates may slightly change here and there, but if your school does that, that's a great way to figure out what's going on and when it's going on. When's the general timeline of when this is happening? So it gives you ample time to talk with that teacher, talk with that grade level, make those kinds of connections, maybe do some pre-teaching on your end if it's applicable for whatever student you're working with. Those kinds of things are really, really helpful and don't require you necessarily to have a conversation with them at all, on the front end. But then, of course, it's that collaboration piece and talking with teachers that's really helpful. The other thing is giving flyers. People forget about how important giving flyers is, and giving information and giving tips. This is a good way to get professional development that doesn't require necessarily any formal, like, in-person contact. This is one that's on our website. You're more than welcome to go to it. There's lots of different ones, and there's different things that you all created. Keep it short and sweet and to the point. A lot of times teachers prefer take home flyers. So don't just send it via email, put it in their mailbox, right? And if your principal doesn't want you putting it in their mailbox, that's okay. Feel free to go hand it out to them, or hand it out to the teachers who you know really need it. Hey, listen, I saw this and thought of you. Like, just hand it to them. And that's really helpful. Most principals don't care, but if you have a principal that does, make sure you ask beforehand. But a lot of them don't care. Teachers just get so many emails. We know this, and we know those teachers that never respond or never look at the emails that we send. So giving them that physical copy, a lot of them put it on their filing cabinet, in my experience. So I definitely recommend things like that. So other ideas for different things you can put in flyers, you could do who the ML student is in our school, their resources for holidays, parent teacher conference tips, translation interpretation tips and tools, strategies, things like that. Now, administrators. All right, we're going to talk about administrators, general school personnel briefly, and then we'll be done. So, administrators, you have to think macro, not micro. Here's something, and it's the same thing with working with content area teachers. You have to understand that we live in the ML world. We love it. We're super important with it. Yeah, I love that, Melinda, that too. Um, we are so passionate about what we do. But what we forget sometimes is that not everybody cares or is super passionate about the things that we care about, right? And administrators have to look at the whole school. So if you're going to be working with an administrator and you're going to be advocating for something, you have to think, how does this fit in with other populations? What are some other populations, or what are some other ways that I can connect the benefits to this with that student? Co-teaching is a good example of this. Some administrators may be hesitant to do that. But if you say this isn't just good for them, it's good for everybody else in the class. I know that from personal experience. Our students were the highest growing students because there were two teachers in that room. And the amount of one on one instruction we could give, or small group instruction that we could give, was enormous compared to other classrooms. And during the COVID rebound years, that was instrumental, right? So if you show them things like that, then that's really helpful. And that's something that you just have to keep in mind. It can be very frustrating, but just if you go into an understanding that your principal has to care more about than just MLs, if you go in knowing that, it can make it easier. It can make you form your arguments a little bit stronger. And so, like you said, you also have to kind of be creative sometimes, to making them care, just like I kind of just talked about. And that's why relationships really matter. You have to sometimes do some things that we'll talk about on the next slide. What are some ways that you can creatively get them to care about what you care about, in terms of having those kinds of conversations, right? But administrators, most of them, not all of them, but most of them, I know there's some administrators that are really, really difficult to work with, but they care and respond to data. They want to see how it is data impacts it. So in South Carolina, you have the access test. We have school report cards in South Carolina from the state. And that's a big deal, right? Share those results. And I don't care what you guys, what kind of language proficiency test you give. Share those results. Don't gatekeep them to yourself. Make sure you're open in sharing them. Celebrate those successes. Specifically say, hey, listen, we had 10 kids exit. We've never had that many exit before. That's incredible, right? Be open with that, because that also shows that you're good at your job. And so they're willing to trust you more if they see you're making a difference in your building, right? So sometimes you have to brag on yourself a little bit and with data in order to get them to be on your side, right? To get on your page. So highlight ML formative assessments that they do. And I listed some there, some classroom-based ones. What are you seeing? What's worth celebrating? Is there anything concerning to you? Say, hey, listen, I noticed that all my MLs, they're not growing in ELA, or they're not growing in math, or they're all kind of bombing this US history, EOC, and a course test. Like, what are we gonna do? Right. And you come to them and you say that, and that opens the opportunity to have that conversation and ultimately collaboration with the administrator. And it shows them that you care, and that you're willing to think about the things that they think about. And a lot of times that really opens up really good conversations with them. And so with administrators, you have to celebrate student success and teacher success. Don't forget about teachers too. You can brag on your teachers. That is so powerful, because if you brag on your teacher, guess what? The administrator is likely going to tell them that you bragged on them. Say, hey, Laura told me that you were blah, 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 blah. And all of a sudden, then you've created that level of trust with your teacher, and they now respect you even more, right? So share it with them openly. Are you telling them what they're doing, what you're doing in your classroom? So many times we complain about the fact that our administrators don't know what we're doing. I can count on one hand, there's probably like four, the amount of times in my career, especially the last school, of how many times an administrator came into my classroom, saw me teach. Not talking about co-teaching, because they came into their general classroom teachers often, but when do they come into our room, right? So you have to be intentional. Administrators can't care about what we do, or they don't know what they don't know, unless they see it themselves or if someone tells them. So you may have to just bite the bullet a little bit and invite them into your classroom and understand, listen, I'm not inviting them in to observe me. I'm not inviting them in to evaluate me. I want them to see what I'm doing with my students. What's the potential that I have? What are the kinds of things that we work on in here? That helps them know what exactly is that you do, and it helps them advocate for you, because they're the ones that are going to advocate for more money for programs for your school, things like that. And they can't do that if they don't see you, right? So those kinds of things increase their awareness and increases their inclusivity, right? And improves their cultural competency, right? It allows them to say what's some instructional decisions that we can do to improve, like to improve our student outcomes for our MLs, right? It allows them to give targeted teacher feedback. So when they go into a classroom, they start thinking about, is this good for MLs or not? Can I talk about that with that? And also includes it in the goals for the school, maybe even in the official goals that they have to write for their school building. It may impact that as well. And because a lot of them generally have to they all feel like all of them have equity on there somewhere for their school improvement plan for their school. And so a lot of times, you talking about it actually gives them information on how to appropriately write a school improvement plan that actually includes equity, not just talks about equity, right? So what can we actually do? What are concrete things? And so that kind of helps them. So also talk about, did a strategy help with everyone, right? It built a rapport and a positive relationship with your administrator as well. So it can't be understated. You have to have those conversations, be open, brag on yourself, brag on your students, brag on your teachers, invite them to come to your class, and tell them the things that are going on, tell them your struggles, and that will build relationship, but also get them on your side a little bit more. So all school employees. So this includes teachers and administrators as well, but the purpose of this section was also with everyone else in the building. So keep in mind that many classified staff so those are in the office, auxiliary staff, teacher assistants, whatever. They're not trained with working with MLs and their families. A lot of times we forget that. And so we get annoyed when they say things that maybe are a little prejudiced or racist or things like that, or they don't respond the way that we need them to, or they get frustrated at things that we're like, it just is what it is, right? They're not trained, right? So you have to show them a little bit of grace, just like we do with our students, and you have to be there to support them. So help them reach out to families, be there with them, walk them alongside with it, clear up any cultural differences in your casual conversations, right? Be humble, make sure you're not condescending, right? So you have to be super nice about it. And the best way that I go about doing that is I validate the feeling and then I address any misconceptions or prejudiced remarks, right? So, for instance, at the last school I worked at, we had a really large Indian population. And so, even though we also have some very complicated last names in our Anglo-Saxon language, the Indian Indian names are actually really phonetic, and so they're not that difficult to say once you know how to pronounce them. But there are a lot of staff members that I worked with that would make fun of them, say, "I wish it was shorter," or just like, "I don't know, that's right," blah, 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 or they would just make an off base mark. And a lot of times it's because they felt uncomfortable. And so you have to say, "Yeah, I know it seems really long, but this is how we're going to do it," or yeah, no, we just need to call them by the name that they asked to be called, and that's their last name. So we're just going to call them by that. Yeah. So, but it's okay to validate the feeling. Like, I understand because a lot of our students would also leave for India in the middle of the school year and say, I know it's really frustrating that they're going to visit their family, but the plane tickets are so expensive, and I know it's really difficult, for them to figure out another time to do it, blah, 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 blah. So there's ways that you can validate a feeling while also addressing it in a way that's kind, right? You can't go to someone and say, you just need to get over it. That is not, that's not going to go over well. But you can say it in a really nice way, you know, and that also helps address anything and also builds their asset-based mindset about those parents and that family, right? So it's important to be positive and realize that our parents also have funds of knowledge. They also have a lot that they bring to the table. And so when you work with any school employee, you want them to make sure that they know that every student has something to bring to the table, and every teacher has something, or every parent has something to bring to the table as well. So the last thing we're going to really talk about here is IEP meetings, parent teacher conferences, meet the teacher night, etc., whatever kind of other thing that you do with your school are amazing opportunities to kind of collaborate and foster these kinds of relationships with our school employees and the families. So you model your asset-based mindset with them, right? You can have those kinds of conversations, show them how welcoming you are to those families, introduce them to the other people in the building. It impacts beliefs and addresses misconceptions in real time, especially with IEP meetings or parent teacher conferences, right? You can also demonstrate how easy it is to use an interpreter, right? The biggest thing that I always talk about is during IEP meetings or parent teacher conferences, one of the biggest things I do is I work on how teachers use academic jargon. And so, for instance, if I'm sitting in an IEP meeting and the someone's going over a goal about fine motor skills, right? And they don't explain what fine motor skills are, because who in the world knows what fine motor skills are, right? It's just the things with your fingers, right? I will say to so and so, "Hey, do you mind explaining what fine motor skills are?" And that's it. That's all I say. Or can you elaborate on what gross motor skills are? Or can you elaborate what that percentile means? Or can you elaborate what that acronym is, right? Can you explain what that is? Because a lot of times our teachers and our staff members, they care so much about our students and they're so passionate about it. We live in a world where we live and breathe our academic language, and our parents, whether English is our first or fifth language, they some of them don't know what our academic language is as a teacher in our world is either. And so this is great for any parent, regardless of whatever language they speak. And just making sure that they get used to, all right, fine motor skills. This is something with your hand. Gross motor skills. This is like your whole big body movements, things like that. Fontes and Pinnell. This is what that is. Dibbles. This is what that is. You just telling them what a letter is on the reading level, or EOC without explaining what EOC is, or this is the 98th percentile. Well, 98th percentile is different than 98%, right? Two different things, right? So regardless of our parent, it's just having those kinds of conversations, and being there and asking those clarifying questions. And then teachers will take it upon themselves to learn, oh, I need to blank. That's also a great way if you're doing flyers for your school building before parent teacher conferences. Include tips like that, and just remind them to keep in mind academic jargon can be a lot for parents, and it can also be a lot for an interpreter. If an interpreter is certified, they should know it, but some of them don't know exactly what we're talking about. So you explaining what that is actually also helps the interpreter if you're using that as well. So also fosters relationships. You explain what you're doing and how your language acquisition is progressing. IEP meetings, there's a section for academic, for access testing for our language stuff. So we should speak at some point during the meeting, right? Do you notice an issue as well? Speak up. You are a team member. You're a valued team member, especially if they're dually certified, but you're a valued team member even in just a regular parent teacher conference, right? So when you speak up and you share what you're doing, you're sharing your struggles. Don't forget to share the good things that they're doing too, right? We A lot of times we can look at it through an asset-based mindset. We can remind the team this is what they're doing well though. They are growing in this, right? Don't forget to be asset-based minded as well. But a lot of times when we're open about what we're doing and open with the things that we're working on, it not only adds more complexity to that student. It looks at them more holistically, right? But what it actually does is it also shows that we bring value to the education of that child. And so that helps the parents see us as a valued educational provider. It helps the rest of our staff, whether it's a school psychologist, whether it's a general ed classroom teacher, whatever. It helps them see that. And once again, as a way to prove that we're on the same team, we're here to collaborate with you. And a lot of times there's times when we're saying, hey, I've been working on that too. And all of a sudden, that's where that teacher learns, oh, Laura also does that too. Huh, I should work with her on that. So it's just a way to foster that kind of collaboration rather than you being an outside provider. You're not an outside random person, right? You're a team member in that school building helping that student achieve whatever academic, social, life goals that they have to achieve. So, in conclusion, understand that you have an opportunity to make an incredible impact just simply in your role. You don't have to be an administrator, you don't have to be a lead teacher, you don't have to be anyone but yourself to make a big impact in your building. You also need to start believing in yourself and your expertise, right? I have imposter syndrome too, right? I a lot of times think, well, what do I have to bring to the table? You have a lot to bring to the table. So be proud of yourself for the things that you've learned and the ways that you've grown, right? Focus on building relationships with every single person in your building, right? So have those conversations, say hello in the hallway, focus on building that collaboration. Understanding that every lesson, every time you push in, every time you co-teach, whatever collaboration you're doing, your work sample, a simple conversation in the hallway, cheering on what a student did, is an opportunity to impact your school's culture and ultimately the educational equity of your school building. So it's all about being genuine but intentional with the conversations that we have and the impact that we're trying to make. And we also need to realize that our mission in that school building is bigger than our office, our classroom, or just our closet, like we talked about. Our mission is more than just helping a student pass the access test, right? It's or whatever language proficiency test you give. It's more than that. And as soon as you realize that and you branch out, you realize you can actually make a difference with every student in that school, not just the MLs in your building. So, additional reading, Advocating for English Learners is my one of my favorite books. It's right behind me. It is just absolutely incredible. Love that book. It's been around forever. I actually talked to Dr. Starfiner at SETSOL last year, and she goes, "I need to do an updated one," because I had her sign this book. In Portraits of Collaboration by Honingsfeld and Dove, there is a chapter about being coaching in your building if you wanted to read more about it. Also, Coaching for Equity by Elena Aguilar. That's more for coaching in general, like if you're an actual coach in your building, but you can definitely draw some things from it if you're wanting to read more about it as well. In closing, Megan is going to put the feedback form back in the chat box. Make sure you stay connected with us. Take a picture of that. Connect with us on social media. Certificates will be emailed to you on or before May 2nd. If you have not received it, like I said, check spam and then email me. And if you haven't gotten it, or you can just contact us on social media and we'll figure it out. So I'm open if you guys have any questions, if you want to figure out anything more. Thank you so much. Our general email address, if you want to talk with anybody, our general SCMLE email address is info@scmle.org as well. So perfect. Yes, thank you. And do the mailing list as well. We love to have everyone join and share our stuff as well. So thank you guys so much. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.